if you have to, like, I don't know, project some thoughts that might be going through the mind of a developing kid. Like, so we have one kid on one of our teams from Chicago who was like always saying, "I want to try to go to school. He gets good grades, whatever." This rule change happened, and now, like, just with talking to him the last few days, he's like, "Man, maybe I'll try to be a draft pick in the OHL." And it's like changing mindsets and like pathways and all that. So, what do you think it's going to do in terms of like the player development pathway? So, if I'm kid in Ontario, how do you think it's going to impact which kids can jump to an OHL team, or how it might change the demographic of the OHL, or are they still going to want to go play in the NAHL or the USHL or BC? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think no one knows. No, but it's like no one actually knows. Like you can't say. I think that the OHL, like it's really good for the Canadian Hockey League. Let me just say this first. A lot of people say it's good for Canadian Hockey League. It's the end of youth sports in Canada. USHL is going to suck. Junior B and OJHL, like the other minor leagues, it's going to be bad for them, and I don't necessarily agree with that. So I think on initial thoughts, I think it's good for the Ontario Hockey League or the CHL, because now you get your kids. And by the way, there's not 3 million of them. There's a handful of kids that have the ability to choose to go as to jump in the possibly be an 18-year-old NHLer, to have the opportunity to go to Boston or one of those big schools for certain at 18 or 19 years old. But there's not that many. So it's not that big of a splash. Okay. But
okay, I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I do think that if you can add over the years, like Adam Fantilli, probably, I'm not saying he would have, but would have probably played in the OHL instead of going to the States and developing in the USHL. You would have had a few guys like that. So I think you're gonna get the younger guys who have the opportunity to be first rounders report. Okay. Having said that, the more volume of quality players that you get, it might make the younger guys, like your second, third rounders, have a much tougher time making a team because there's only so many spots. So I think it kind of, I don't know if it makes sense. It kind of makes the league a little older, kind of.
So this
Kinda?
okay. So this kind of goes into what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So you're saying how like you think it's a small number of kids that actually are affected because they have the choice. But my thought is, does this open up maybe like another 2-year gap where if I'm
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So let's say if I'm a 16-year-old, I just finished my OHL draft year, didn't get drafted, but I can make a junior B team or a junior A team or whatever. I go play there for a couple years. Is it likely, or are the odds increased that better players want to stay there to develop before jumping to the OHL because they can still get exposure for NCAA schools out of the OHL. So like if I'm 18 or whatever, and I'm the best player on my OJHL team, and someone from the Saginaw Spirit comes down and says, "Hey, like you're a pretty good player. Do you want to come to our camp? Do you want to come see like how it'll work?"
Nothing to lose now.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
So like if he wants to go and
there
try
are
it,
players that were in that situation.
right. So now like I feel like there's a fundamental shift happening where like the CHL is going to be looked at like a exposure league for NCAA just as much as it is an exposure league for the NHL. So if I'm in that position where I had 2 good years in junior in Canada, well now there's the time arc is now longer than it would have seemed before, because it was like if you're 16 going for the OHL or the CHL or whatever, and you miss that, it's like, damn, like it's over. And we talk about this all the time, how there's nothing plugging those years between your OHL draft and 18, 19, whereas in the States, they have the USHL, the NAHL. They don't make a decision until after high school, you know? So I feel like this kind of is going to start to feel a little bit like that, where it's not so bad to be in a development kind of mindset for a couple more years, because you know you can get exposure there. Does that kind of make sense? My thread there or no?
Yeah, it does. Oh, 100%. Like I think it's I think it okay if you like when I did a podcast or a webinar or whatever it was with Mike Snee and Hogan from College Hockey Inc. One of the comments that, because it was at the time my son was getting drafted to the OHL. These guys, Gulf Storm. uh, and he said, so we were talking about the different models like for college, because it was that competition. He was trying to prove that college is a better route, and I wasn't trying to prove CHL was or wasn't. I was just listening to him. But of course, everyone's going to make their stand and sell it, right? And there's really no reason to sell it, you know. But it came down to the sales pitch was like in Canada or in Ontario at least. Well, no, in Canada. Well, out west it's even a year younger. At 16 years old, it's almost like you almost had to make your mind up. You don't have to, but it's
Kind of have to.
you kind of got to make good, decent decisions. And he said, see, if you lived on the same street as me, he goes, that would never even come across your mind. You would just go play for whatever junior team, and it wouldn't have to be the USHL. It could be the North America. There's so many good junior leagues. He goes, and that's where, and they pluck them from everywhere. So I said, that's interesting. I said, there's zero pressure. He goes, it's like you could play U18 and just go along the path and you'll get recognized. And I think just by the colleges opening up that door now, I think a lot of players can just kind of go, like with intelligence, kind of go, okay, I can just play. I don't have to rush. So now you can take a 16-year-old kid. Like if you think about it, a 16-year-old kid now doesn't have to worry about, oh, I have to make the Canadian Hockey League. I can play. I could have a good U18 year. I could make a jump to junior B, and the next year maybe try to do junior A, and the next year try to go to USHL, and the next year go to the OHL, whatever path you want to do. It's not a rush. You just have to have a good year every year. So I think that takes a little bit of pressure off, right? So I think it's good. So anyways, from my perspective, for the player, it's awesome. But I don't know how many players it actually affects. And I could be way off base, but I really don't think so. The reason I say that is because just you look at the draft, the OHL draft, college. Okay, so what happens typically in Canada is everybody says, everybody wants to get drafted, but the ones that aren't rated very high always say that I just want to get a scholarship anyways. So it's like that excuse that you right that escape valve, fork in the road. Oh, I'm taking that one anyways. And then as both sides, if you went to the CHL or you went to college, at some point you realize, oh, this is really hard. Like I'm not as good as I thought it was. Like you have to taste it first, right? So what was my point there? So I think a lot of the kids that it doesn't really affect that many kids, to be honest, because there's you find out real quick that there's only so many spots, and even if you went to you chased whatever junior league you can, you realize pretty quick that this is a lot harder than I thought. Yeah. A lot harder. There's just not that many spots. So like people that. So now you just have to play good in your league, just dominate your league. So that was something that you said earlier. It's like, you said one of our kids said, maybe I'm going to jump leagues to get to a better league. It's like, that's fine if you try, but here's the reality. What league are you in? I don't care what it is. U18, midget, minor midget, whatever the names are now, OHL. If you're not dominating that league, you don't get to play in another league. You have to dominate it. You have to be really good at what you do. And if you're sitting here going, I need to get to a better league to be a better player, it's like, that's fine if you're dominating.